Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. Before I get started, just a few days away from Data Architecture Day, hosted by us as well. Saturday, May 16th, an all-day Twitch marathon, 13 hours worth of marathoning. So learn more or sign up at meetup.com/trypass. You'll also get a link to the schedule, which will show all of these sessions over the course of the day. There's a lot of architectural content set up for you, so looking forward to it. Now, we have our illustrious panel, or at least our illuminated panel. So, directly to my right, Mala Mahadevan. Welcome, Mala.
Hi, good evening.
Mala's turned everything around so that we can see her rather than the sun. So it's working out. It's working really well.
Thank you.
Directly below me, also in the sun, is Tom Norman.
Good evening. How are you today?
You're fine. You're fine. We can see it.
There you go. Sun gone.
Man of darkness now. And in the bottom right-hand corner, where there's no need for illumination, Tracy Baggiano. Now,
Yes.
now she's just got a laptop light.
The hair takes care of it, so.
So, the normal order of Shop Talk is that we answer questions, Q&A in chat. So if you have questions, anything not involving Jabberwocks, we're going to try to answer them. Drop it in chat. We'll hit it in the order in which I find most interesting. Incidentally, if you have questions and, aren't here during a normal Shop Talk, hit us up via email. You'll see the email scrolling across the screen every once in a while. So with this, we're going to jump into questions. And the first one that I want to get to, since we don't have anything in chat just yet, because I can't advise you on how to beat zombie killers. No Jabberwock questions. Where do they go? They go to a different stream. This is a no Jabberwock question zone. If you want to ask about Lewis Carroll questions, maybe, but that would probably also be another stream. So first question that we have for tonight comes from Mark Gordon. And this is my paraphrasing. This is not Mark saying it. But are there actually any good GUIs for Git?
I recommend the one we use at work, which is the only one I've used, so that's the only one I can recommend. And it's not too terrible. Tortoise Git.
Tortoise Git, yeah. So Tortoise Git, based similarly to Tortoise SVN, it works pretty well. It is, should start with is Git good? Let's not get flame war going here so early. So Tortoise Git integrates with Windows Explorer. It's not a real UI most of the time, and that's probably to its advantage because it'll give you context menu, like right click and say commit, right click and revert. So that one's a pretty reasonable solution.
I use VS Code.
VS Code? VS Code has some nice Git integration. The whole DevOps experience is pretty solid.
I use Visual Studio, and then when Git really gets into a bind, I use Source Tree.
Yep, Visual Studio because Tom's company spends more money, I guess.
They do.
They do, evidently, yes.
But
I technically have that on my machine, I just don't use it.
That's fair. I mean, if you're in an administrative role, code is probably a better experience anyhow. But that's a debate for another day, unless somebody asks that question, in which case I'll be grudgingly consigned.
Has anybody used Azure Data Studio and interacted with Git?
Not yet.
No. I struggle with using it even in place of Management Studio. I'm not trying hard enough. So not gone as far as Git yet.
We don't have it installed anywhere where I can use it against a production server, so that's the reason I haven't adopted it yet.
Yeah.
I can't access my main servers with it, so it hinders my ability to adopt it.
It's a sad commentary, but I will say the sad commentary, yeah, we have, Visual Studio Enterprise, and we've got also run Enterprise SQL Server. But the other thing is guess who's not on Kerberos yet? So that's a this year type of thing. We just never have. I've always had this fear of SPNs and getting them all linked up, and and I've tried it in the past and it's just been nightmares. So it
They
is
have a free tool for that to help you fix them.
I know, I saw that. I've seen
The
that
only
tool.
time I used
And it
Azure
works
Data.
too.
Go on, Tracy.
Oh, and
Yeah.
it works too. I've used it.
It does.
I've used it internally on my test machine to get them to work correctly.
So you have to have to note, if you're going to use, we're basically a shop that we do not want to use SQL Auth at all. So to use Azure Data Studio, you've got to have Kerberos, and so we've got to get that going, and that's going to be probably here before the end of the second quarter. We'll have it live.
All right, and then my solution is source tree. I will use TortoiseGit occasionally, especially for things like cherry picking. I think cherry picking's experience is better with Tortoise than source tree's experience. Otherwise, I'll usually use source tree. I will pop to a terminal for git stash and git stash pop because it's just easier to do in a terminal. Also, source tree chokes once you have thousands of branches. Now, why you would have thousands of branches?
Because you don't clean up after yourself.
Kevin
you have
did it
too many-
evidently because he knows.
Yeah.
You have too many groups of people in the same repository.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
I have no
That
idea
sounds-
what I'm talking about there. So, does anybody run their own Git servers, or do you administer using some other technique? So,
We use Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps, yep. That's what we use.
Yeah, Azure DevOps has hosted Git. We use Bitbucket. Before that, we did have our own, I believe we had our own self-hosted Git server. So, maybe.
I don't know why you would want to host it yourself anymore.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
kind of comes back to a discussion on email that if you are a source control company, then you want to build your own source control server, obviously. You want to build your own service. If you are a company that uses source control, you don't necessarily want to host your own server. Let somebody else do that work and take advantage of it. Use your time where it is a comparative advantage.
I know that for my presentations and my demos and all that kind of stuff, just so people are aware, you can get a free Azure DevOps for up to 5 people.
Yeah.
So if you've never played with it, then definitely get out there and and then you can also learn about CI/CD and all that kind of good fun stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely worth messing around with. There's a lot of good documentation on it as well. There's a lot of documentation on it as well.
So, yeah, I don't see any reason to spin up your own server. That is just another server you've got to maintain where
Extra
There's some-
work.
there's so many other things that allow you to do it.
Yeah, so Mike mentions IBM shops typically don't consider using cloud hosting for source control, or at least they didn't back in the day. I think I don't know if that's still the case. It may very well still be the case. There are going to be parts of the industry where they'll say, you know what, I would rather have my own server hosting my own code. And Solomon brings up a perfectly reasonable point of how secure your code actually is. Like, have larger, well-known projects been hacked or stolen? And that's a reasonable question. I mean, that's a good argument against public third-party holding. So it's
The other
Go ahead, Tom.
argument is, at least with Azure DevOps, and I'm sure that they fixed this, but about a year and a half ago, we went down totally for the day because there was
South
San
Central.
Antonio data center went down, and of all people, Microsoft didn't have it spread to other data centers. So Azure DevOps was down all day long.
Yeah, that was a pretty big piece of news.
A lot of people were down. So
Yes. Well, everybody who used DevOps, yeah.
yeah.
So those are fair points. I guess it's hard for me to say security will be better on a self-hosted server because, at the same time, how often are your sysadmins updating the source control server? Hopefully they're keeping it up to date, but are they regularly updating to the latest version of Git and making sure that everything works? So you have administration risks there as well. I mean, I do consider it roughly the same as email. It's a service that every company that does development needs, but you may not need to host it yourself.
The question would be is, how many people actually do host it themselves? That would be an interesting statistic nowadays to see how many people actually do host it themselves versus getting a service.
For Git, I get the feeling that the numbers are probably a lot lower.
Mm-hmm.
For prior source control systems, if we're talking like SVN or CVS, absolutely that number is really close to 100%.
Oh yeah.
So just the nature
or the old Team
Foundation
what was
server.
that? Yeah.
Old TFS, which became
Visual
Team
Source
Foundation's
Save.
source control. So Raymond mentions that they still host their own. Oh, Visual Source Safe. Yeah, you could go back to those days.
Yeah.
So Azure DevOps. Neil mentions using Azure DevOps, which was VSTS, Visual Studio Team Systems, and I think for the move toward distributed source control systems like Git and Mercurial made it so that because you didn't have the single central server, or at least you shouldn't have the single central server. In an ideal world, in reality, we still do. But in an ideal world, you don't have that single central server, so you don't really have the host for Git. You have potentially everybody's a host for Git. It's a different mental model. The question is the black cat taking questions?
No.
No, okay, sorry.
We're just
You have to
keeping her away
speak
from the keyboard at the moment.
You're gonna have to speak to his press secretary.
And keep her from spilling the drink. Away from the keyboard, away from the drink.
A little while back, Mike asked differential compression. Do they have a big compression problem like source control has? And I'd like to hear more about what you mean by that, Mike, because I'm not sure I can answer that offhand. Looking through the list here. Have there been exploits against source control? So against a source control server, I don't know. In the sense of, SVN or Git itself. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if there have been at some point, because it's still software connected to the internet. But I admit that I don't really pay attention to that. So, unfortunately, that's my answer. I don't know.
I was just looking up. Microsoft Investigate claims that its GitHub account was hacked on May 8th, 2020. So
That was 3 days ago.
Oh my.
yeah.
So that's a little bit different. I mean, that would be somebody
That's probably
gets a password.
Microsoft's hack. Yeah, that's probably Microsoft's account that they're trying to hack.
Yeah. Stolen credentials, yeah, or or socially engineered into clicking the reset password.
Yeah,
Or
that sounds
something.
more like it.
I don't know of GitHub as itself as an entire repositories, had issues. I haven't heard anything like that.
Yeah. So let's see. Next question, John Fan. So how many presentations do you normally do in a month? And sessions submitted to a conference. What are optimal numbers? When it comes
Optimal
to
numbers.
presenting.
Oh my. I would start with one a month. That is hard enough.
One a month is
It,
hard.
it all depends upon, especially once SQL Saturdays get started back up, it all depends upon your financial wherewithal and what you can absorb into your budget to go out to the events. You can, if you're flying to them and it's going to cost you at least $500 for a weekend.
That's partly why I stopped doing it.
Yeah, it's going to cost you
Too expensive, yeah.
at least $500. I try to write a new presentation maybe once a year. Yeah.
So if your goal is to learn speaking skills without spending money on travel or time, there is a Toastmasters group that is run out of the Microsoft office in Chicago that I'm part of. So they meet Fridays once a month, and everybody I think there's about 6 or 8 of us now, and everybody gets to speak on a certain subject for like 15-20 minutes, and they give you feedback on how you did. So if your goal is to improve speaking skills, then that is a way to do it from home. And if anyone wants more information, I'd be happy to share.
The other part is I
Yeah.
will gladly accept presentations at the virtualization virtual group. So it pass. So,
Right.
and we've been doing things like containers. We just did containers with DevOps. We got another one this week with virtualization and IO patterns, so, you can definitely find virtualization groups. Your local user group a lot of times will let you speak to gain experience, and you've got people here that would probably gladly let you do that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and
but basically a topic you're going to present more than one time. When you do one, you're going to create a library of topics, and you'll present them more than once.
Neil mentions having about 1 to 2 a week sometimes. Some months only 1 to 2. Yeah, that's at the really high end of things.
Yes.
Like Mike Christensen says, more than one, less than Kevin. That's a pretty broad range.
And it is a big range. I usually shoot for 2 a month if I have to do them in person at the high range. Sometimes 3. And then virtually I can do, it depends. I did 3 in 1 week one time at local user groups all in 1 week. So I don't know. I don't have a good filter. So
yeah, and it also
depends on what you can handle.
Depends on what you can handle. Depends on area. I mean, we're all in the southeastern United States, so there's a nice amount of conferences. Plus, we can pretty easily fly to most cities in the U.S. one hop or direct, unless you're on my airline, in which case everything's one hop.
Or it's broken if I'm on it.
Yeah, or it breaks if Tracy's on the plane. Yeah, it's amazing how that works. But
and there are ones that are within driving range, so we have quite a few that are within driving range of Raleigh, and I will say this, I went to SQL Saturday and spoke SQL Server Saturday Atlanta year and a half ago or whatever, and it would have been quicker to drive to Atlanta than it was to get to the airport, set, wait, fly, get the car, drive across Atlanta.
You say that, but
faster.
How much time did you spend on 285?
He's correct. It's just the only reason I fly to Atlanta is fear of sleeping while I'm driving.
Yeah. It's like 6.5 hours to Atlanta or whatever. So
Yeah, I'll still fly.
you,
And I'll still book
you,
my flights on yours so it takes you longer.
so do you fly, Kevin? Do you fly to Charlotte?
Okay, in all seriousness, there have been times when I was thinking about flying to Charlotte. Yes. I mean,
Okay.
frankly, I fly to Charlotte like 25 times in a normal year anyhow, because that's the only way I can fly to any other city on the planet, apparently. There is a train from Raleigh to Charlotte, but I would rather fly. I mean, I get peanuts.
He's looking for the.
I used to fly from Louisville to Indy when I was there.
Yeah,
and
that's
I was
about the same thing. It's like you
literally
get up to 13,000 feet.
I was known in the airport as this only girl who goes from here to Indy. The people at the airport knew me.
That's when you know you travel too much.
But the big thing is if you're going to speak at SQL Saturdays, you got to have the budget for it.
Right.
Because it is, like I said, at least $500 per trip.
Yeah,
that's minimum.
That is minimum. Yeah.
Yes.
I've gotten away with a couple $100. You guys got to book cheaper. Split an Airbnb with somebody. Stay in a hotel with somebody. You got to do cheaper, man.
Yeah, if you drive to the event.
Okay. Don't do Kevin. He drives. He gets in first class on the airplane, so can't be Kevin. He's going to be 500, 1,000.
Of course, remember Tracy? We drove down to Spartanburg, and she was like going, "How much is the fuel?" She was like surprised at my car, how cheap it was. So
he's got one. What you got the natural gas car?
Yeah, natural gas.
Well, the thing with room pooling and such also, Tracy, is that it has to work with the right person, right? I know when you go, I go with you, but sometimes
I get along with anybody though, so it works out great for me.
So
you just got to, Airbnbs are sometimes a lot cheaper, even if it's just you over a hotel.
Yeah, and I have booked Airbnbs like Virginia Beach, which is an easy drive from Raleigh to speak at Virginia Beach. But the time of year that she has it, hotels are like very expensive. I actually did an Airbnb when I went to Virginia Beach because it was just crazy. A lot of times I'm like Kevin, Kevin's trying to get the airline miles. A lot of times I'm trying to get the free hotel rooms, I'll do the hotel to get the hotel rooms, later down the road. Kevin's trying to get the airline miles. I'm trying to get the hotel mile rewards.
That is the trade-off. So yeah, as far as presentations go, like I was saying, depends on where you're at. Right now is a great time to get into presenting because, well, you can't travel anywhere. So all those expenses are currently out. So hey, I can present. Like for example, I'm gonna do SQL Saturday in Brisbane, and normally that wouldn't be in my budget. But as far as it goes, right now, I just have to stay up a little late. It's a really good time to get in on speaking, and I know, John Fan, you're in an area where it's difficult to find a lot of places to present. So I do understand the difficulty that brings, the time zone differences, the relative lack of groups. But virtual presentations are certainly going to be a viable option for you as you work it up if you're interested.
Yes.
And then the thing is to get topics that you're comfortable with or you really want to delve into and learn more about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one too. Like for example, I'm beginning to write a art of data classification. And of course, I've done some data classification, but I'm going to have to really dig in to do a full presentation on data classification.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a nice thing about presenting that I really like is that it forces you to learn learn the topic in real depth, like learn about everything.
That is
And
true.
then
Yeah.
the other thing is don't hesitate to present on something you might not feel like you know everything about, because you won't. There's always at least 2 or 3 people in the room that's going to know as much or more than you do, and that can assist you during your presentation,
Correct.
which is fine, absolutely
Mm-hmm.
fine.
But Anders mentions that if it's more than 50 miles, just fly. I'm with you. That's my philosophy.
Anders, he's gonna fly in his Corvette. Doesn't
Oh,
count.
Anders doesn't have a Corvette anymore.
Motorcycle, same thing. Harley, he's just gonna fly on that. That doesn't count.
Just ramp it. It'll be good. So Mike asks, well, who thinks that virtual meetings won't become the norm? That's a good question. Will virtual meetings become the norm?
I
Panelists,
wouldn't
what do you
say the
say?
norm. I would think they'll definitely become more popular than they were before all this started.
There's still a certain amount of networking you're able to do that
Right.
you're not able to do technically
Uh-huh.
virtually. It's almost like going to the past summit. There's a big difference of going to past summit and then just possibly listen to past TV or whatever the case may be. There's a huge difference there. It's much like working, as we talked about, working remote. That's one of the disadvantages to working remote, and Slack really helped it because now there's a lot of conversation that you can kind of follow in Slack, but it used to be you could be totally left out of the hallway conversations.
That's true. What are your thoughts, Tracy?
I think they're going to become more popular, but I think the networking is going to keep you from getting rid of them altogether in person. So, but I think it's going to take time for everybody to, get over needing to social distance or physically distance, as I like to call it.
Right.
I agree. I think I'm basically in line with Tracy. They'll become more popular, but there will absolutely be in-person meetings. It may take another year for that to come back, but
Yes.
Mike C mentions that, look, people need to meet each other. Humans are social animals.
Yes.
We want to interact with people, and it's stressful interacting with a backlit screen and a little dot.
Yeah.
So
we got to get back together because I've got to be able to give people the stickers that I've
Yay!
had made up. So
I still got the SQL 2019 ones. I never made it to a meeting to give out to everybody.
yeah,
Mhm.
so
Because I didn't make it.
the new logo. So I've got stickers for everybody.
So we'll leave a box of stickers at Six Forks Road, and people can drive by one at a time and pick up a sticker.
There you go. There you
6
go.
feet apart. Drive by 6 feet apart. Pick them up.
So yeah, virtual private rooms can help a little bit, but still there's a difference in feel. And I say this as a complete shut-in who is absolutely enjoying it right now. That, hey, I don't have to leave my house. I'm okay with that. But there comes a time when you just want to be with people as opposed to be standing in an area where there's no other people, but you're talking to somebody and you're hearing things. Normally it's called insanity.
I love that.
Kevin's been around me too long.
But yeah, Neil mentions that, when you're at a conference like Past Summit, it's not as much about the event. It's not as much about the sessions. It's about the ability to network with people, the ability to see folks that you just haven't had the chance to see.
Yes.
And
Amen
that's
to
one
that.
of the
Yes.
that's one of the secret reasons why it's good to go to some conferences. It's not the one that I would tell my manager, but it is the one that I would privately use as, yeah, this is a reason to get here.
Yes.
Well, it's very much that the SQL community is a family, and if you get involved and you've gotten out there and stuff, it's great. It's like a big, huge family reunion when we go back every year. It's like I told my boss last week, I was like going, I'm already planning to go to Pass Summit. And if it requires me to pay my own way this year because we just don't have the budget because what's happened with COVID-19 and stuff, I'm like, I'm okay with that. I will pay my own way to get down there. So.
Right.
Yeah, I've done it many times out of pocket at jobs that did not pay. I've been at jobs that paid part of the way. I've taken a Greyhound bus to cities where Summit happens. This was before they made Seattle their home. So done it in every way possible, because what you get out of that is really valuable for you as a person and for your career. At least that's been my experience.
It's my experience also. And this year we don't have to fly coast to coast. Yeah,
That's
we
true.
only have to fly to Houston this year.
Yep. Halfway. Fly halfway.
Correct.
That's assuming there is an in-person event,
That is
which I
right.
doubt somehow. Yeah.
Which I have nothing to say on that.
You say you doubt it that we'll have an in-person event in November?
I don't think it's safe to have any in-person event unless there is some, some serious breakthrough happens with what's going on now.
Okay.
Yeah, I could see that.
I
Let's see.
would go if there was a live in-person event. Even with
No, the average crowd, at least the people who have been with this community for the past two and a half decades, we are near the age group that are pretty vulnerable. We're not young.
Well, true.
To me, that's the reason. Yeah, so quite a lot of people who come there are mid-age or much older. So we'll see.
I'll let you know after my antibody test.
There you go.
Did you have one?
I'm scheduled to have one.
Oh, okay.
I was sick in February in the middle of everything traveling, and I think I might have had it. So mild case of it. So, and my doctor's doing antibody tests, recommending them if you think you had it. So find out.
That's good.
Very cool.
It's the sickest I ever was.
All right. So, question for Tom: are you able to talk about your project on data classification?
Oh,
Ooh, yeah, talk.
Yes, I am able to talk about it.
Great answer.
It's being written. It's going to be given to Chattanooga virtually. So if you want to actually listen to it and stuff, come June 27th, I believe it is.
Yes, June 27th, Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be given to Chattanooga. It is a brand new session, so I can't talk a whole lot on it besides of what I've actually done myself. I think there's a whole lot of work that still needs to be done on it, and I will say I was very disappointed in the session I went to at Pass Summit last year. I thought they did a horrible job with it, and after talking to the speaker later, is basically because they were wanting to sell their own product instead of showing what SSMS could even do. So
that'll be a problem.
Yep. So is there a specific question someone has about data classification?
Yeah, so Raymond, if you have specific questions, we can follow up. Otherwise, check out SQL Saturday Chattanooga.
Yep, because I will be giving it in SQL Saturday Chattanooga on June 27th.
About 6 weeks from now.
And if you have any questions. Otherwise, you're free to hit me up on Twitter or whatever, and I'll definitely answer them.
Mike C, question on all-at-once processing. Go for it.
All-at-once processing. Can we get more detail?
Yep.
What does that mean?
It's just open. He's going to ask a question about that. While he's asking a question about that, Mike, who is different from Mike C, asks ontology with a question mark. The answer is hermeneutics, labeled data and labeling. So if you'd like to get a little bit more detailed in your question, Mike, that may be something we can talk about. I think I may know where you're going with that, but I would certainly like a little bit more fleshing out, just so that we know we're on the right page. Hermeneutics from Husserl, who was a professor at the University of Freiburg. So I walked by the hall one time, and that's my story with Husserl. So from Ray earlier, database documentation. What tools have you used, especially for redesigning systems, outside of the usual suspects like Irwin or Studio?
Well,
You mean a schema documentation or database documentation? That's a little bit different. If you want to re-engineer the schema and do it, you can still use Visio. I've tried the Redgate database documenter tool that's out there. It's not too bad, although it does not suit the requirements we have where we work. But it does a decent job, and it's part of the tool belt that SQL Compare, SQL Data Compare, and all that comes with. There are some other tools too that I went through. I think Apex SQL had one, and some other places had one.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I actually use Apex SQL Documenter to document. It does a real good job of hyperlinks, and you can get a CHM file that you can pass around to people. And really do some, allow you to hyperlink. It's not going to be a schema, looking at the type of schema thing that you're thinking of. It's more of just, here's the table, here's the fields, here's the view.
That's what
whatever
I was
the
thinking.
case
Yes,
may be.
yes.
Now, if you want something that's going to be more of an entity diagram, I personally like, and I'm glad they brought it back, I like within SSMS, the database diagram tool. And I use that maybe on just sometimes one table, because then I want to go, okay, now add in everything that's got a foreign key to it so I can see everything around what it's touching and stuff. So, and you got dependencies, you got the SQL dependency within SSMS also that you can get. So
yeah, I do not like the SSMS database diagram tool. It's
Me either.
incredibly limited.
It is very limited. It is very limited for sure.
Well, I'm using it I'm using it not for the entire database. I'm looking at a specific function of an application, like
a small subset of tables. Yeah.
For that, it's perfect.
Right.
Yeah, if it fits on a single screen without scrolling, that's about where it falls apart. So
one other thing I don't like about database diagrams is also that you can't export it or do anything with it.
Yep.
You just have to view it on SSMS, or maybe you can print it, and even that doesn't look terribly nice, but that's about it. Yeah. But it's free, and there was one hosting solution that I used temporarily at work. I forgot what the name was, which was decent. Let me try and find it.
Of course, if you're going to do entity diagrams, didn't they bring back with Visio? I thought they brought back with Visio the entity diagrams and stuff.
The Lucid chart, LUCID chart. So it's not too bad. I use that for some time.
Yeah.
It's free with a limited number of tables. I think it's 20 tables or something like that. And beyond that, also, it's a very reasonable fee. My boss was willing to pay for it, but just could not find time to keep it up. And it's a hosted solution, by the way. So if you have sensitive data and you don't trust how they store it, it may not be right for you. But it's a decent tool.
And it integrates into Jira and wiki pages and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice if you use that suite of tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, Visio, I believe, has come back. He brought it back to the ability to do it in Visio.
Mm-hmm.
Because they took it out for a while, and I'm like going, why?
That was the main thing I used Visio for, and then it was gone when I went to go do it. So.
No, I think it's back now, right?
It is back now.
Yeah,
it wasn't there at my last job when I tried to use it.
Yeah.
It was just last year.
They brought it back in the 365 version of Visio, if I remember right. Reverse engineering of database diagrams.
I think I went and installed the 2010 version just so I could do what I needed to do. And then I had to go get a really old ODBC driver, and it was a lot of fun.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Until we went and used something else.
I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of pretty much any of the data architecture tools. The ones that there are two classes. There's free and crappy, and there's expensive and crappy.
Yeah. If you want a really good one, Irwin is a really good one, but it's really expensive.
Yeah, I don't know. My okay. This could be just because I have limited experience with Irwin. I never liked it that much.
Oh, I agree. I
never liked dealing with their licensing. I'm not saying too much on that. Nope.
Well, Idera owns them now, so Tracy, and Idera, a little, better licensing now.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They didn't own them while I was an ACE, so I'm not sure what they do with their licensing.
Yeah, so there are a few tools. I'll drop in some links, including some of the ones that chat is coming up with. I'm not going to dignify Andrews's Toad with a
no.
validation. I might actually purge you for that.
So I posted the name of the one we used for some time at work, Kevin. If you like, you can share it with them.
Lucid Chart.
Yeah, I've actually used Lucid Chart a little bit.
So Icon Pro asks, Mala, why or what did Redgate not do for your organization? So why did their database documenter not fit?
Our schema is really large. For one thing, very complex and very large. Second thing that I had difficulty with that thing was that I could not see what it was doing that I could not get out of querying extended properties and using, a mix of extended properties and database diagrams. Basically, I was looking for either, something that gives me a really good scalable chart, a large chart that is easy to print at least in parts, and does all the connections by itself and such. And I don't recall everything about it that I found problematic. I just thought it was too basic for our needs. But I can go back to work and look at the justification I wrote for my boss. I have a few points there that I sent him, and maybe share it, next week or sometime, or ask Kevin to post it on Meetup. Yeah, I wrote up a few things that I didn't find, and that wasn't even the tool. That was just that our schema was way too complicated for that thing. Okay, it might work if you have a very basic structure where you are.
So did he ever say whether he wanted an Andy diagram or whether he just wanted something that documented the tables?
It was a question of both, so it's kind of a broad question.
Okay.
Right.
Neil mentions Doc Express. That was actually another one I think that Mala tried out from Pragmatic Works.
Yeah.
Is that the one that Century One now? Century One's got a fairly new one.
No, the thing with Doc Express is that it does an excellent job of documenting your SSIS packages. And I think that was its primary goal, is to document SSIS packages. When it comes to documenting schema, not so much, or data dictionary. I wasn't impressed by those things at all. But if you have SSIS packages, it's probably the only tool out there that can document the flow for you, like really well.
Yeah, and Century One
So,
bought
yeah.
Pragmatic Works tools, which
Yeah.
All right, so we have a question from email that I actually didn't get to, so I want to get to it now. Question is, I'm going to teach a couple of friends SQL, just the DML subset, like select, insert, update, delete. We're using MS Access because the GUI can make it easy to do work early on.
Why?
But later, I wanted to introduce them to a larger database, like a SQL Server. What is the best free or really cheap database out there? And money is an issue in this case. So my answer is SQL Server. Developer Edition is completely free. If you wanted to, you could do Express Edition and actually put it out in production. You're limited to 10 gigs of data, but if you were just trying it out on your own, like if you're teaching people, yeah, Developer Edition, install it on your machines, and that's completely free.
Yeah, I'd be like going, don't even go to Access, just go straight to Developer Edition. Being free, like you said, Kevin. And I did look up, looks like Century One's got a new database documenting tool. So
It's the same one as Pragmatic, Tom.
Yeah, it's Doc Express.
Sentry bought Pragmatic, so it's the same Doc Express.
No, there's a new one. No, it's not Doc Express. It's something totally different.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And Raymond mentioned SQL Express via Docker containers. So if the people know about Docker, absolutely. If you need something lightweight, SQL Server Express LocalDB, Solomon's right. That is one of your easiest lightweight methods. This, if you're thinking about teaching somebody who's brand new to SQL and you just want to limit the amount of effort involved in, well, first you have to do this. First you have to turn on CPU virtualization in your BIOS. Then probably Developer Edition is the easiest route because you can next your way through and not kill yourself as long as you stick to fairly small databases. Once you get beyond fairly small databases, now you have to think about administration, things like regular backup strategy, etc., etc. But really early on, Docker setup, if the person knows enough about Docker that this isn't going to be a hairy dog or shaggy dog tail, then yeah. But that quickly turns into, well, let's spend the first 6 hours trying to get my laptop to work with Docker because it's blue screening.
Yeah,
you have to already know Docker if you're going to go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would not advise going Docker as the route. I would stay with, and there is just FYI, Kendra Little and Redgate came out with. In fact, I emailed it to myself for one of my coworkers that's switching over from MySQL. She's got a new series on T-SQL for beginners.
Yes, I saw her blog post about that.
Yeah.
So
you may not, you may point them to that and not, kind of guide them and not really have to be too much hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep, that's a fair point.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, and just stay away from Access.
Yeah.
Just, being honest.
I'm being honest too. Stay away from Access. You can install SQL Server Developer next, and
Right.
Restore a database, and boom, you're there.
Right.
And
yeah,
and it sort of writes, selects, and inserts and updates for you when you're right-clicking on things too. So you really don't need.
Well, and if you go into the template part of it, the template manager, you can actually, there's your syntax pretty much written for you almost.
Yep.
right. Now, if you are a big fan of local DB like Solomon is, you can easily open that up. It's an easy installation. It'll work really well with Visual Studio. So if they have Visual Studio, LocalDB is neither a container nor a virtual machine. It is simply a really scaled down installation of SQL Server that's intended for a single user and mostly for development database. So you integrate it with Visual Studio, and then I have my database project. I can like deploy to LocalDB so it runs locally, but I'm never going to have that touch. Nobody's going to access it outside of me. It gets weird with named pipes.
Yeah, if you're talking about teaching them T-SQL, then I would hesitate going the Visual Studio route, even though you get Community Edition for free, because then you've got the overhead of teaching them also about Visual Studio and how to do things.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
You know, it's using SSMS, in my opinion, is far easier than using Visual Studio, even though I'm now heavily into Visual Studio.
Yeah, and one other option is that you can use, if it's a small database, Azure SQL Database. So I think there's still a free tier. If not, you've got your $5 tier, and they can get the 1 month free trial of Azure credits. So you can set up that very inexpensive small database that's sitting in Azure. That way you don't have to install anything anywhere. You just have to set up firewall permissions in Azure.
It would be nice if they would come out with for people that speak and stuff like that, a tier that would be, besides having to be an MVP, you know, for people to work with it, Azure more.
Or having a company that pays for like software assurance.
Yep, I've got that. So
yeah, so let's see, going back through here, setup time for external volume. So with external volumes in Docker, there is not much in the way of a difference in terms of like how much time it takes to start that thing up. Not a huge difference. Big Mike in Austin mentions that I believes it's the third week for Kendra's weekly beginning T-SQL teachings. That sounds reasonable.
it is. You'll have to go back and listen to 2 recordings.
But Kendra's a great teacher, so
She is a great teacher. Yep.
Also, the blog post that Grant writes for beginners. I think he writes a special series and he has a new post out every month or so. But that entire series he has on his blog is excellent, very well written.
Yeah.
What about SQL Central?
SQL Server Central?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great content there. So the question was specifically that Mark is going to be training people. So he's got some idea he wants to share the information, and it was more about the tooling to make that
the platform he wants to use. Yeah.
And SQL Server Developer Edition, maybe LocalDB, especially if you are going to pop open Visual Studio. If the person's brand new to databases and to development, I wouldn't want to start the person off in Visual Studio.
Nope.
So I could see just having a Dev Edition and here's Management Studio, and let's start there. Starting in Access, I understand why Mark would want to start in Access due to experience in that area. I think it can work for somebody who is absolutely brand new to databases and to development, but those are some small training wheels.
Well, the other one, the other front end that you might want to think about, especially if you're training someone and you just want to kind of build some things up, is go into Azure Data Studio and build some notebooks and that they can follow along with.
Mm-hmm.
True. Notebooks are going to be a great pedagogical or andragogical technique for this. Agreed. So we're going to get to this question from Mike C because I promised that I would. his question. When we say all expressions that appear in the same logical query processing phase are evaluated conceptually at the same point in time, does that mean that the query looks for all instances of from and then all instances of where, etc.? So the example is a subquery where it's like select something from customer where customer ID not in, select customer ID from angry customers. Short answer, no. That is not the way that it works. The longer answer is, think of it instead as you have a query. Inside my where clause, where x equals 6 and y equals 9 and z equals 14, conceptually, these are all evaluated at the same time. We don't start with the x and then filter y and then filter z. Instead, the database optimizer figures out the physical implementation that is fastest based off of things like statistics and indexing. But from our standpoint, how we write the query doesn't matter if I put X first and you put Z first. Even if you pronounce Z as Z, it doesn't matter. So within that single where clause, all of those things are considered to evaluate at the same time. If you have a subquery processing is handled differently, and it gets more complicated depending on if it's a subquery versus an apply operation versus a common table expression. But think of it instead conceptually as like all of the joins, kind of, sort of. Now, even a join doesn't happen all at the same time, so I take that part back. But within a filter, within like a where clause, the criteria for a join all happen at the same time. But the individual joins would still be considered different because you join in specific orderings. Though, as I'm talking myself in and out of this, I'm now thinking about, well, if I have a situation where I've got sort of two paths, the optimizer can still choose which path to take. So all of those joins are still kind of considered concurrent.
I just like the fact that he's leaving out his angry customers too.
Yes, there's angry customers.
And he's just ditching them.
So Neil mentions that the tree algebraizer does the work internally. Each statement is an individual statement that gets processed. So yeah, that's much
what I thought.
More respectable way of saying what I was ambling toward. Yes. But that's the short version of it. So how would it be processed? Customers where customer ID is not in a select clause. Basically, we would say from customer C, and then perform the filtering, the where clause, where customer ID is not in. And now inside here, I'll say from angry customers. Then we perform the select. Then we come back up to perform the final projection. But as you start adding more filters, as you start adding more subqueries, it gets more complicated, more faster. So, education setup begs a great question. Anybody have a solution to meeting presentation and teaching environment that's OS and installation independent, that a student could come to the meeting and participate without having the same operating system or install environment or shell scripts, etc., etc.? So the short answer is kind of. The long answer is yes, but it takes a lot of effort. The really long answer is that there are websites. One of them that I really like is called Katacoda. I'm going to drop a link in chat. Katacoda is a learning technique where they'll let you work on essentially containerized notebooks. So if you're interested in learning something like Kubernetes, or there's a little bit on machine learning, there's quite a bit on Docker, and this is all about spinning up a container, letting you work with it, and then tearing down the container afterward. DataCamp has a similar process for their courses, where every exercise is a container that gets spun up. As far as individual people doing training, Steph Locke had a pretty good setup where she would essentially give everybody who went to her trainings, here's your Azure credentials. You're going to log into this VM and you'll have access to resources that have been pre-created. So she had to take the time writing the scripts to create all of these resources, spin up those virtual machines, give people the credentials for it, but they had those credentials for a certain amount of time. It's like training day plus a few extra days. And then she would shut them down afterward. So there are some tools. I see this as still kind of an early days approach. And it doesn't have to be a cloud-based solution. You could just as easily have a server that you can create containers or VMs and give people access to resources on those VMs. It's just, hauling around a server that 30 people can use can get difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But,
or even having connectivity too, because if you lost connectivity from wherever you're at, you're sunk.
Right. Yeah, connectivity can be a problem. And also client issues. So even if you have your own local server, still installing the clients and stuff on people's machines can get tricky. So that is where a cloud-based solution really does benefit. Where like a tool like Katacoda will allow you to just open up a browser and it works. I don't have to worry about installing special software because all of the installation part is on the remote servers. So it is a tricky problem otherwise, and I think that cloud-based solutions tend to work really well for this type of problem. When I do training, I had an R training, and my solution was to use Azure Notebooks and just say, before the training began, go to this URL, clone my notebooks, and now you have access to Azure Notebooks. Because I tried running an R training when everybody was in a room, and several people had work laptops they couldn't install stuff on. One person had a Mac. I'm like, I have no idea how to work with this. One person had a machine that was so old R would not install. And so you had this big mix where we spent probably an hour just trying to get all of the software installed. That's an hour that you're missing on training. So cloud-based solutions probably going to be a smart answer for that.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
All right, so we are at time, and one of these weeks I'm actually going to talk about the troubleshooting ML services memory allocation errors. I've had this on the Shop Talk agenda for a month now, but we're not going to talk about it tonight. It's probably going to be one of those items that like 9 months from now, it's still going to be on there, and we finally have time to talk about it. I'll forget exactly, like, what was I talking about here? But maybe one of these days we'll get to that. Sadly, we are out of time. So as we wrap things up, I do want to talk about a couple of events that are coming up. Of course, my promo on May 16th, Data Architecture Day. This Saturday, it's going to be 13 hours of joy. So check us out. Literally all day. Starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Goes on until 10 p.m. Eastern Time. It is going to be a humdinger of an event. 8KB is coming up in June 13th. And also check out SQLSaturday.com. There are a few SQL Saturdays that are all virtual at this point. So the only reason that it matters now is, what time zone it starts in. Like Cincinnati is going to be this May 16th. And I realized I misspelled Cincinnati in my notes. Brisbane and Porterone are both May 30th. Though, interestingly, Brisbane's will technically be Friday night if you're in the Eastern time zone in the US. So that way you could actually get to both of those SQL Saturdays. You just have to stay up all night. Chattanooga, Tom mentioned June 27th. And I'll drop a link to the datacommunity.dev, which is a new resource that is trying to collect a bunch of different links to events that are going on. So that's a pretty interesting site. I got somebody recommended it to me very recently, so I wanted to pay that forward and pass it along. So with that,
And
Go
then
ahead, Tom.
don't forget our meeting tomorrow night.
oh, I've totally forgotten that. So our meeting tomorrow night, Jared Fauché is going to talk about deleting lots of data. The way to do it, very small amounts at a time. So that will be this upcoming Tuesday, which is tomorrow. So same station, different time. It will be an interesting topic. You are completely right, John Fan. And with that, everybody have a great evening.
See you next week.
Special thank you to Neil.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Neil.
Yep.
Mala gives virtual hugs.
Bye.